She pointed at the door and said, "You've overstayed your welcome." Claire's voice was sharp, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. My son Michael stood just behind her, arms crossed, eyes avoiding mine. Not a word. Not even a whisper of protest. That house was mine. I laid its foundation with my own 2 hands. Buried my wife, Marjorie, in that town cemetery just 3 blocks down. But now, my daughter-in-law acted like I was some squatter, some burden. As I stepped out, the wind caught the door she slammed shut behind me. That sound still echoes in my chest. There was a time when that house was full of laughter, full of life. Before Claire, before the tension, before the silence crept in like mold. I still remember the smell of fresh-cut pine when Marjorie and I first moved in. We were barely 30, just kids with a mortgage and a dream. The walls weren't even painted yet. She brought home wildflowers to place in the windows, and I'd whistle while hammering floorboards. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And we had each other. Marjorie was the kind of woman who made a home just by walking into it. She filled rooms with warmth and the soft hum of her lullabies. When we had Michael, the entire world narrowed into that one tiny crib. I used to come home from the factory, grease still on my hands, bones aching, just to sit by his crib and watch him breathe. I was tired, always tired, but I'd never felt more alive. Michael was a quiet boy. Thoughtful. Always watching. He used to follow me around the yard, mimicking every swing of the rake, every turn of the wrench. One summer, I built him a treehouse in the oak tree out front, the same tree that still stands today. Marjorie made lemonade, and the 3 of us would sit out there under the branches, him telling wild stories about pirates and dragons while she laughed like wind chimes. I raised him on simple principles: respect your elders, finish what you start, and don't take more than you need. Marjorie used to say I was old-fashioned, but she'd smile when she said it. There was pride in that smile. We weren't wealthy, but the house stayed warm, meals were hot, and love was plentiful. Then Marjorie got sick. It started with a cough. A little thing, we thought. But it didn't go away. And by the time we knew it was serious, the doctor was already talking in timelines and options. I still remember the night she told me, "Don't let this house turn cold, John. Keep it full of life. Promise me." I promised. And when she passed in our bedroom, the same one Claire would later redecorate without asking, I kept that promise. Or I tried to. Michael came back around a lot in those early days after the funeral. He'd help with the yard, sit with me on the porch, just silent company. I think we both were trying to hold on to her, somehow. I clung to those visits. They made the house feel less empty. When he told me he'd met someone, I was thrilled. Claire seemed polite enough at first. Smiled at the right times. Said all the right things. When they struggled with rent and student loans, I offered the guest room. "Your family," I said. "This house has always been yours too." It felt like the right thing, what Marjorie would have wanted. I wanted the house to echo with footsteps again. I wanted laughter in the kitchen, not just the ticking of a clock. At first, it was good. Claire cooked sometimes, and I'd find Michael humming in the garage, working on small projects. I'd leave the living room if they wanted privacy. I wasn't trying to be in the way. Just there, part of the background, like the old wallpaper Marjorie had picked. But things changed slowly. Claire started calling the guest room our office. Then it became our side of the house. She redecorated, took down Marjorie's old photos, replaced them with abstract prints and vision boards. Michael stopped helping with the yard. Said he was busy with work. Still, I held my tongue. I remembered Marjorie's words. Keep the house full of life. Keep the family together. I kept giving. Paid most of the bills. Did the groceries. When Claire lost her job, I picked up the slack without complaint. I'd done more with less before, raising Michael taught me that. And besides, I thought it was temporary. Just a rough patch. But the warmth, it began to disappear. Dinners grew quiet. Claire often ate in their room. Michael would apologize, sometimes, but always with tired eyes and half-hearted words. I chalked it up to stress. Young couples had to find their rhythm. Maybe they just needed space. So I made myself smaller. I stopped sitting in the living room. Took my meals at the counter instead. Wore headphones to watch TV. I didn't want to interfere. I wanted them to feel at home. That was my mistake. Because slowly, somehow, the house stopped being our home, and became their house. I didn't see it happening at first. But looking back now, the signs were everywhere. The warmth was gone. Marjorie's laughter had long since faded, and even the echoes of our old life were starting to vanish. Still, I told myself, this is family. Family doesn't kick each other out. Family holds on, even when things get hard. I had spent a lifetime teaching Michael those lessons. I just never realized he'd stopped listening. It didn't happen all at once. That's what made it so hard to see, or maybe just so easy to ignore. 1,000 tiny shifts that slowly turned my home into something unfamiliar. I first noticed it with the thermostat. One morning, I woke up shivering. The air had gone cold, the kind of cold that gets in your joints and makes your bones ache. I shuffled over to the hallway to check the settings, and it was down to 62 degrees. Claire passed behind me, holding her mug of coffee. She didn't even stop, just said, "We like it cooler." We. Not I. Not Michael. We. I let it go. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she'd turn it back up. But she didn't. That thermostat never went above 64 again unless I adjusted it, and even then, it never stayed for long. Then there were the pictures. Marjorie and I had a wall full of memories, our wedding photo, Michael's first steps, the camping trip where he fell in the river and laughed so hard he couldn't breathe. One day, I came home from the grocery store and found most of them gone. Replaced by generic art, patterns, abstract shapes, black and white quotes about ambition and success. I asked Michael about it. He didn't look up from his phone. Claire's redecorating. She says it'll help resale value someday. Resale value? I blinked. We're not selling. He just shrugged. It's just an expression, Dad. She's nesting. Nesting. Like I was the old feather that didn't match the new design. There were other things too, little comments that stung more than they should have. Like when I was cooking one night, my usual beef stew, the one Marjorie loved. Claire came in, sniffed the air, and wrinkled her nose. "Oh, you're making that again." Michael didn't say anything. Just took his plate and ate in the living room with her. Or the time I was watching the news and Claire walked by, muttering, "We really need to get him into podcasts or something. The noise is unbearable." She said it like I wasn't even in the room. Like I was just furniture, noisy, outdated furniture. The hardest part wasn't the disrespect. It was the silence. Michael never defended me. Never pulled her aside and said, "Hey, that's my dad." He just went along with it. Let it slide. And I let him slide. Because every time I tried to bring it up, he'd deflect. "Work's been stressful. Claire's under a lot of pressure. You're reading too much into things, Dad." I started to question myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was the problem. I was getting older, after all. Maybe I was just in the way. Then came the financial shifts. At first, I paid the bills because I wanted to. It was still my house, my responsibility. But over time, I noticed my bank account draining faster than usual. Michael had taken over managing the utilities, to make things easier. I didn't mind, until I saw the receipts. Streaming subscriptions I didn't use. Expensive meal deliveries. A new espresso machine I never touched. I confronted him once, gently. "You've been spending a lot out of the joint account." He shrugged. "It's all for the house, Dad. It's still your name on it, right?" But something in his tone felt off, like a question disguised as a trap. Claire's attitude became more territorial. She had friends over without asking. Moved furniture without a word. One day I found her measuring the guest room. "Planning something?" I asked, trying to sound light. She glanced at me, eyes cool. "Just seeing how it might work as a nursery." My heart jumped. "Are you too?" She laughed. "Not yet. But we're thinking ahead." Ahead. Without me. That night, I sat out on the porch under the oak tree. I stared up at the branches, remembering the day I planted it. Marjorie had been pregnant with Michael. She wanted something that would grow with him. I had told her that tree would still be here long after we were gone. And now I wondered if they were just waiting for me to be gone too. I started staying out of their way more. I ate in my room. I took long walks. I visited the library just to read in silence. I thought maybe if I made myself smaller, they'd treat me better. But shrinking only made me easier to ignore. Michael had changed. Or maybe I had just failed to see who he really was. The boy who once clung to my leg during storms, who cried when I missed a school play, who once told me, "I want to be just like you, Dad." Now he barely looked me in the eye. And when he did, there was something behind his gaze: impatience? Embarrassment? Resentment? I didn't know when I had become a burden. But one thing was becoming clear. I was no longer living with family. I was occupying space. And they were waiting for that space to be free. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm, sunny, the kind of day that begged for lemonade and folding chairs. Claire had organized a backyard cookout, said it was a housewarming for her coworkers. That word rubbed me wrong from the start. Housewarming? The house wasn't new. It wasn't theirs. It was the same place Marjorie and I had lived in for over 40 years. But I didn't say anything. Just smiled and brought out the folding chairs from the shed. I grilled the burgers. That was always my job. Claire didn't even ask, just handed me the spatula and said, "You know what you're doing, right?" Her tone wasn't friendly. It was sharp, expectant. I bit back the urge to respond and went to work. The grill gave me something to focus on, a place to stand apart while the crowd mingled and laughed. Michael floated around like a host, but he never once brought anyone over to introduce me. I watched people walking through my house like it was a showroom. One woman even asked Claire, "Is this your first home?" And Claire, without missing a beat, smiled and said, "Yes, it's our starter. We're hoping to upgrade in a few years once the market's right." I froze. I turned toward Michael, expecting him to correct her. To say, "Actually, this is my father's home." To offer me even a shred of acknowledgement. But he just chuckled and sipped his drink. My hand tightened around the spatula. Later that day, I was refilling the cooler when I overheard Claire talking near the patio with two of her friends. "It's just a matter of time," she said, laughing. "Once we have the deed, we'll finally get to update the kitchen." I told Michael, "No way am I living with those awful counters any longer." One of her friends asked, "Does your father-in-law know?" Claire made a face. "He's old school. Thinks he'll live here forever. But we've already spoken to a realtor. We just need a few things finalized." The words felt like ice water poured down my spine. I stood there, beer bottle in hand, unable to move. My feet rooted to the ground. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I wasn't just being pushed aside. I was being erased. Later, when people began to leave, one of Claire's friends, a kind-looking woman with a short bob, smiled at me and said, "You must be Michael's tenant." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Oh," she said, laughing awkwardly. "Sorry." Claire said her father-in-law was renting a room here while looking for a senior living place. I assumed that was you. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I went inside. Sat on the edge of my bed. That tiny guest room with my one recliner and the old dresser Marjorie had picked out. I stared at the wall, where once a photo of our wedding had hung. It was gone now. Replaced by Claire's framed print of some quote about manifesting abundance. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat there, listening to the muffled sounds of Michael and Claire laughing from the living room. Watching the shadows move across the ceiling. Wondering how we had come to this. The next morning, I tried to talk to Michael. He was standing in the kitchen, pouring coffee. I approached slowly, careful with my words. "Michael, are you planning to sell the house?" He stiffened. Didn't turn around. "Claire and I are looking at options, Dad." "It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I echoed. "This house, this was supposed to be your home, yes. But not like this. I never signed anything. I didn't agree to." He cut me off. "You don't have to, Dad. You're not thinking clearly anymore. Claire and I have been handling things." My jaw clenched. Handling things? Behind my back? Michael finally turned to look at me, but his eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Hollow. "It's not behind your back. You don't understand how complicated life is now. This house is too much for you. You shouldn't be alone here." "I'm not alone," I said softly. "You live here." But he didn't respond to that. Instead, he walked out of the kitchen, coffee in hand, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding. That was the moment something inside me broke, not in anger, but in understanding. They weren't waiting for me to pass. They were pushing me toward the door, slowly but deliberately. Rewriting the story of this home, painting themselves as the owners, the planners, the new generation. And I was just a leftover. That afternoon, I stayed in my room. Heard Claire on the phone again, laughing about backsplash tiles and finally getting rid of the old carpet. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, remembering the night Marjorie and I had moved in. We had eaten Chinese takeout on the floor, surrounded by boxes, toasting with grape soda because we couldn't afford champagne. I had poured my whole life into this house. And now they wanted it without me in it. Not just the space. But the story. A few days after the cookout, I started noticing how quiet things became when I entered a room. Voices would lower. Laptops would close. Phones would slip into pockets. Something was being said, and it wasn't meant for me. One afternoon, I walked in from the backyard and heard Claire in the dining room. I paused before turning the corner, her voice floating through the half-open door. "I've already talked to the broker. He said we just need one more signature. Once the title's cleared, it's all ours." There was a silence, then Michael's low voice, "Do you think he suspects anything?" Claire laughed. "Please. He still thinks he's in charge because he mows the lawn. Let him play pretend a little longer. Once the paperwork's final, we'll tell him gently." My heart dropped. I backed away, quiet as I could, and returned to the yard. I sat under the oak tree, my palms sweating, mind spinning. One more signature. That meant they were trying to change the deed, maybe had already tried. I hadn't signed anything recently, or had I? I remembered a few months earlier. Michael had handed me a small stack of papers, said it was just a refinance, lowering the property taxes. Just some routine stuff, he'd called it. I signed without reading too closely. Trusted him. He was my son. Now, I wasn't so sure. That night, while they were out, I went into Michael's office. I hated doing it, felt like betrayal, like something Marjorie would have scolded me for. But I needed answers. In the bottom drawer, I found a manila folder labeled, Property, Hawthorne. My street. Inside were scanned documents. Title transfers. Power of attorney drafts. A half-completed change of ownership form. My name had been crossed out in pencil. Michael's and Claire's were typed in underneath. I sat in that office for a long time. My hands were shaking. My stomach turned. I felt like I might be sick. This wasn't just tension. This wasn't misunderstanding or generational difference. This was a plan. They were preparing to take everything I'd built, quietly, legally, without telling me until it was too late. I wasn't just being erased from the living room or ignored during dinner. I was being removed from the very foundation of my life. I left the office and locked the door behind me. That night, I dreamed of Marjorie. She was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, brow furrowed in that way she had when something wasn't right. "You're letting them walk over you, John," she said. "You didn't raise our son to be this man." "I don't know what happened," I told her in the dream. "I don't know when he changed." Marjorie shook her head. "He didn't change. He made choices. So now you need to make yours." I woke up in a sweat, her voice echoing in my ears. The next morning, I started keeping notes. Every strange interaction. Every overheard conversation. I began scanning the mail, taking photos of documents left on counters. I bought a cheap recorder at the hardware store and kept it in my pocket during dinner. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation. One evening, I asked Michael casually, "Ever think about what happens to this place when I'm gone?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean the house," I said. "What happens to it when I'm not around?" "Have you two talked about that?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. I mean, we figured it would just come to us, right? It's only natural." "Natural," I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. Michael frowned. "Is there something you're not telling me? Are you sick?" I stared at him. "No, son. I'm not sick. But maybe I've been blind." He looked uncomfortable. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. Just thinking out loud. But inside, something was hardening. I wasn't going to let them take what I'd built. Not through manipulation. Not through lies. And certainly not behind my back. That night, I opened the old box in my closet, the one with our marriage license, birth certificates, and the original deed to the house. I stared at Marjorie's signature, strong and elegant next to mine. That paper wasn't just a legal document. It was a life, our life. Every room, every floorboard, every patch of paint had our fingerprints on it. And they wanted to gut it for granite countertops. The next day, I made 2 phone calls. One to my old friend Samuel, a retired notary who used to play poker with me and Marjorie on Fridays. He still owed me a favor. The second was to a lawyer. It was time I stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. This was war, the quiet kind. The kind fought with pens, not fists. And I was finally ready to fight back. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I didn't raise my voice. Not once. I waited for the right moment, and I asked calmly, the way a man does when he's already made peace with the truth. It was early evening, the sky outside glowing amber, and the house was quiet for once. Claire had gone out with friends, and Michael was alone in the living room, scrolling through his phone. I stood by the hallway, watching him for a moment before I spoke. "Michael," I said. "We need to talk." He looked up, distracted. "Yeah? What's up?" I stepped forward, sat across from him in the old armchair Marjorie used to claim as hers. I took a breath, steadying my hands. "I found the papers. The ones in your office. The title transfer, the forged initials. I know what you and Claire are planning." Michael froze. For a second, he said nothing. Then he laughed, too loud, too forced. "Dad, come on. That's not what it looks like." I raised a hand. "Don't insult me. Please. Just be honest. That's all I've ever asked of you." He shifted, eyes darting to the hallway like Claire might swoop in to rescue him. "Claire, she thought we were doing what's best. You're getting older, and the house is a lot to manage." "I've been managing it fine," I said quietly. "Until you two started treating me like a ghost." Michael sighed, rubbing his face. "We weren't trying to hurt you. It's complicated, Dad." "No, it's not," I said. "It's simple. You decided the house should be yours, while I'm still alive in it." He stood abruptly. "Look, Claire and I have put a lot into this place. We paid for new appliances, With my money," I snapped, sharper than I meant to. He stopped. His face went red, jaw tight. "I've paid the bills, Michael. Every month. Even the ones you were supposed to handle. Don't stand there and tell me you've invested in this place when I've been the one keeping the lights on." He turned away, pacing now. "You're twisting everything. Claire just wants stability. She didn't grow up with." "This isn't about Claire," I said. "This is about you. My son. The boy I raised to be honest and fair. And now I barely recognize the man standing in front of me." Michael's voice softened, almost a whisper. "You think I wanted it to go this way?" I didn't answer. He sat back down, hands clasped between his knees. "I didn't plan it, Dad. Not at first. But Claire kept pushing, saying we were living like guests in someone else's house. And I started to feel it too. Like I was just borrowing everything." "You were," I said. "But not because I wanted to keep it from you. I was always going to pass this place down to you, Michael. Always. But not like this. Not by deceit." He looked up, guilt flickering across his face. I don't know how to fix it now." "You don't," I said. "It's not yours to fix." He didn't argue. That night, he went to bed early, and I sat on the porch for a long time, staring at the oak tree. My hands rested on the arms of the chair, worn smooth by decades of use. The air was cool, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. The next morning, the neighbors noticed something different. Margaret, from across the street, waved at me during her morning walk. She paused at the gate. "John, everything all right?" I nodded. "Better than it's been in a while." She stepped closer, voice low. "I don't mean to pry, but I heard things, through the grapevine. About Claire. About the house." I studied her face. There was no malice in her eyes. Just quiet concern. "You heard right," I said. She nodded slowly. "You're not the only one. Claire's rubbed a lot of folks the wrong way. You know, if you ever need anything, help, a place to stay, you've got half the block behind you." Her words warmed something in me I didn't realize had gone cold. That evening, I pulled out my old notebook, the one I used when I was working construction bids. I started jotting things down. Legal contacts. Bank account balances. A list of personal belongings. I wasn't planning a fight fueled by anger. I was planning justice. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need shouting to be heard. The next day, I called the lawyer again. "I'm ready," I told him. We set a date. Not for a battle, but for something much more powerful: control. Dignity. A reclaiming of the story they tried to rewrite without me. Something had shifted inside me, yes, but not bitterness. Not revenge. It was clarity. I had spent my whole life trying to protect Michael. But now, for the first time, I had to protect myself. And I wasn't going to fail. The lawyer's office was quiet, tucked between a bakery and a used bookstore in the older part of town. The kind of place most people forget exists until they really need it. I hadn't stepped foot in there since Marjorie passed, back when we'd updated our joint will, leaving everything to Michael. It had felt right then. Natural. Like the circle closing as it should. But now, that circle had been broken. Not by time, but by betrayal. Mr. Hawthorne, the receptionist, greeted warmly. "Mr. Ellison is expecting you." Samuel Ellison was an old friend of mine. We'd played poker in his garage on Friday nights for 20 years. He'd been there when Michael was born, stood beside me at Marjorie's funeral. Time had added weight to his shoulders and gray to his beard, but his eyes were still sharp, steady. "John," he said, shaking my hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Don't we all?" I said, taking a seat across from him. He already had a folder open, papers neatly arranged. "You said you want to update your will. Tell me everything." I told him. Every word. About the forged documents, the overheard conversations, the plans Claire made when she thought I wasn't listening. About the way my own son looked at me, not like a father, but like an obstacle. Samuel listened without interrupting. He didn't take notes. He didn't need to. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "I can draw up a new will immediately. We'll revoke the previous version and make sure the language is ironclad." "I want him out," I said softly. "Not just out of the will. Out of the house. Eventually. But I want to do this the right way. No drama." Samuel nodded. "We can place all assets in a living trust, with you as sole trustee. And we'll add a forfeiture clause. If Michael or Claire tries to contest anything, they lose all claim. Everything goes to charity." I exhaled, slow and heavy. Marjorie always supported the local veterans' home. "Make that the recipient." He made a note. "Are you sure, John? This is final. Once you pass, there's no going back. No second chances." I hesitated. My eyes drifted to the window, where sunlight caught the dust in the air, swirling like smoke. I thought about Michael at age 7, handing me a crayon drawing of our house. Stick figures out front. A tree. A sun with a smile. That little boy is gone, I reminded myself. And the man he became, he made his choice. "I'm sure," I said. We spent the next hour going through each detail. The house. The bank accounts. The safe deposit box I still had at the bank with Marjorie's letters inside. Every corner of my life laid out in black ink and signatures. When it came time to sign, Samuel placed the pen in front of me. "You okay?" I looked at the line, at my own name beneath it, and nodded. "No," I said. "But I will be." The pen felt heavier than usual. Or maybe it was just the weight of what it meant. I signed. We shook hands again at the door. "You did the right thing, John," Samuel said quietly. "Feels like the saddest right thing I've ever done," I replied. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Claire came home late, laughing loudly into her phone, keys jingling in her hand. She didn't even glance at me. just breezed past like I was part of the furniture. But I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt calm. In control. She and Michael didn't know it yet, but their story had changed course. A few days later, I visited the veterans' home. Quiet place. Humble. Men in wheelchairs playing chess beneath a tree, nurses chatting softly in the halls. I asked for a tour. Told them I was considering making a contribution. They showed me a common room with chipped paint and a broken ceiling fan. A kitchen with appliances older than I was. And men, proud, tired men, laughing over stories they barely remembered. I thought of Marjorie, how she used to knit blankets for this place. She always said, "These men gave up everything. The least we can do is give them warmth." I told the director about the clause in my new will. He wept. Back home, I began to clear out some of my things. Quietly, without drama. I sorted old photos, boxed up clothes, found the stack of letters Marjorie had written me over the years, birthday notes, anniversary cards, one she slipped into my coat pocket before her first surgery that said, "If you're reading this, I'm okay." I read that one 3 times. I placed it in a small wooden box. Labeled it to be opened by the right hands. Because now, I knew, the people who deserved my legacy weren't just those who shared my blood. They were the ones who remembered who I was. Who respected what I built. And soon, this house, my house, would reflect that too. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of day that drifts by unnoticed, sky gray, air still. I had just returned from the post office, where I'd mailed a few forms to the county clerk, the final steps to cement the new trust. I was unlocking the door when I heard laughter from inside. Loud, sharp. Claire's voice. I stepped in, and there she was, sitting at the dining table with a man in a blazer and clipboard. A realtor. He was already flipping through glossy brochures with pictures of kitchens that didn't look anything like mine. Claire looked up, smiling like I was a delivery man. "Oh," she said, clearly annoyed. "You're back early." I didn't answer right away. My eyes fell on the man beside her. He looked up and extended a hand. "Hi, I'm Darren. We're just doing a walkthrough. Claire said today was a good time." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I turned to her. "A walkthrough?" Claire sighed, as if I were a child missing the obvious. "It's preliminary. Just to get an idea of market value. Michael and I have been discussing this for months." "You knew that?" "No," I said firmly. "I didn't." "Well," she said with a tight smile, "you do now." She turned back to Darren. "You can ignore him. He's not the decision maker." The words hit like a slap. Darren gave an awkward chuckle but continued his notes. I stood still, every nerve in my body buzzing. She walked him through the living room, pointing at walls, muttering about potential for open concept. Then down the hall, toward my room. I followed. When they reached my door, I stepped between them. "You won't be showing him this room," I said. Claire folded her arms. "It's part of the property." "No," I said. "It's my room. And this is my house." Darren looked between us, clearly uncomfortable now. "Maybe I should come back later." "You won't need to come back at all," I said, my voice steady. "There won't be a sale." Claire scoffed. "John, don't be dramatic. This is happening. We're not asking." I looked her in the eye. For the first time, I didn't feel tired or sad. I felt done. I stepped back, went into my room, and closed the door. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I opened my drawer, pulled out the folder with the notarized will and trust papers. Everything was in place. By the end of that week, they would both receive official notices. But I wasn't going to wait. I opened my phone and made one more call, to the buyer Samuel had mentioned. A man who worked with a local nonprofit, looking for properties to convert into community homes. He was interested in homes with character, with stories. Homes like mine. I told him to schedule a visit for Friday. Friday morning, I packed a small bag. Just a few things: the photo of Marjorie and me from our wedding day, a bundle of her letters, the old watch Michael gave me when he was 15. I didn't take much. Just what mattered. Then I placed the folder of documents in my satchel and waited on the porch. The sky was clear. For the first time in weeks, I felt the sun on my face and actually let it warm me. No more waiting. No more watching from the shadows. At 11 a.m., the buyer arrived, polite, soft-spoken, well-dressed. His name was Mr. Keller. We shook hands firmly. "Everything ready?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It's time." Claire came out of the house just as I was leading Mr. Keller up the steps. She blinked at him, confused. "Can I help you?" I didn't give her a chance. "This is Mr. Keller," I said, loud enough for Michael, now emerging behind her, to hear. "He's here to discuss a sale of my house." Michael's brow furrowed. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I handed him a copy of the trust paperwork. "You've been living here under the illusion that you had control. That ends today." Claire took the papers from him, scanned them, and her face went pale. "What is this?" "It's the new deed," I said calmly. "Filed, notarized, legally binding. The house is in a living trust, solely under my name. If either of you contests it, everything goes to the veterans' home in Marjorie's honor." Claire's mouth opened, but no sound came. Michael looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in years, there was something like fear in his eyes. "You can't just sell the house out from under us," he said, voice trembling. "I can," I said. "And I will. But not to evict you. Mr. Keller's group will turn it into a community space. You'll have time to find somewhere else. But you won't be living here on my back anymore." Claire's face turned a deeper shade of white. This is theft." "No," I said. "What you tried to do was theft. This is correction." Mr. Keller nodded respectfully. "Would you like to begin the tour?" "Yes," I said. "Let's start in the backyard. The oak tree's older than both of them combined." As we walked off, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd already seen everything I needed. The invitation came a few days later, cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering, like it meant something. Michael and Claire were hosting a housewarming party. Not for the house, obviously. They'd moved into a small condo across town, one they could barely afford. Word around town was that Claire's parents had fronted the down payment, something about needing to get back on their feet. The irony of it all nearly made me laugh. They were holding the party at a community hall. Claire's idea, I'm sure, a way to reclaim some dignity. I wasn't supposed to be there, of course. The envelope had no name. Just a printed invite slipped into my mailbox by accident, or maybe fate. I decided to go. Not for them. For me. I wore my best suit, the one Marjorie liked most. Navy blue, slightly faded at the cuffs, but it still held its shape. I polished my shoes, combed my hair, and took the manila folder with me. The hall was already buzzing when I arrived. Tables lined with cupcakes and catered trays, people standing in circles, plastic wine glasses in hand. Claire was holding court near the buffet, laughing loudly, her voice cutting through the noise like a carving knife. Michael stood beside her, nodding along like a loyal dog. They didn't see me right away. I stood near the door for a few minutes, watching. Listening. Some folks recognized me, gave polite nods or awkward smiles. Others whispered. Then Claire saw me. The smile dropped from her face like a stone. Michael turned, and I swear, for a second, I saw the boy he used to be, nervous, uncertain, looking for an escape. "Dad," he said, stepping forward. "What are you doing here?" I held up the invitation. "Thought I'd come see how you're settling into your new place. Thought maybe this time, you'd let me say goodbye properly." Claire's voice was sharp. "This isn't appropriate." I ignored her. Instead, I stepped toward the center of the room and gently tapped a glass with a spoon. The chatter quieted. "I'll only take a moment," I said. "I know most of you don't know me. I'm John Hawthorne. This party? This celebration? It only exists because I made a decision to end a chapter of my life." Eyes turned. Some curious. Some confused. I continued, voice steady. "My son and his wife lived in my house for nearly 3 years. Rent-free. Bill-free. They enjoyed every corner of a home I built with my own hands. A home I once shared with my wife, Marjorie, before she passed." Murmurs spread through the room. Claire's eyes darted like a trapped animal. Michael took a step forward, but I raised a hand. I offered them shelter, family, support. And in return, they tried to quietly take that home from me. Behind my back. Through forged documents and whispered conversations. They called realtors. Measured rooms for renovations. Laughed about when I'd finally be gone. Gasps now. Someone set their drink down too hard. I opened the folder. This is the updated trust. This is the deed, now sealed in court. This is the will that protects what's left of my life's work. And this, I held up the last paper, is a signed letter from the buyer who is turning that house into a home for veterans and widowed seniors. People who know what sacrifice looks like. I let that sink in. Claire looked pale. Michael was blinking fast, jaw tight. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's respect, for myself. For Marjorie. For the love that built that home." The silence was heavy. Then someone clapped. It was Margaret, my neighbor. She stood near the door, tears in her eyes. One by one, others joined. A few hesitant, some wholehearted. Claire turned and stormed toward the hallway. Michael stayed frozen. I stepped off to the side, folder still in hand. Michael followed, stopping just beside me. "You didn't have to humiliate us," he muttered. "I didn't," I said. "You did that yourself. I just brought the truth." He shook his head, voice low. "You think this makes you better?" "No," I said. "It makes me whole." He didn't respond. Just stood there for a moment, then walked away. I didn't stop him. Later that evening, as I stepped out into the night, I felt a strange quietness in my chest. Not joy. Not sadness. Just peace. It wasn't about winning. It was about being seen. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. After the confrontation, the world went quiet. Not the kind of quiet you find in a church or on a calm lake, but the heavy kind. The kind that settles on your shoulders and follows you from room to room. A stillness filled with echoes. Michael didn't call. Claire didn't write. There were no surprise visits, no letters asking for forgiveness. Just silence. I returned to the cabin I had rented outside town, a small place, nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, a creaky porch swing, and a wood stove that made the whole place smell faintly of cedar. It was enough. More than enough, actually. Peace needs very little room to stretch. I'd wake up early, brew coffee on the old gas range, and sit outside wrapped in Marjorie's old shawl. The birds came and went. The sun always rose, no matter who did or didn't reach out. The town, of course, had its own thoughts. Some folks gave me nods of quiet approval when they saw me. Others offered short, sad smiles, the kind people give when they think you've lost more than you've gained. At the diner, the waitress always poured my coffee without asking and slipped an extra biscuit on my plate. No one brought up Michael. Not directly. But I could feel it in the pauses. Margaret stopped by one afternoon with a loaf of banana bread. Said it was just too much for one woman. We sat on the porch, both of us watching the leaves start to turn. You did what most people can't, she said. You stood up for yourself. Even if it cost you. I nodded, not trusting my voice. There was pride in her eyes. But also sadness. I still remember Michael chasing after the ice cream truck on his bike, she said. That boy loved you more than the sun. I don't know what happened. I shrugged. Maybe I loved him enough to blind myself. She patted my hand gently. You loved him the way any good father would. But love doesn't mean letting yourself be erased. After she left, I walked to the mailbox. Inside was a card, no return address. Just a simple note in unfamiliar handwriting. Thank you for giving us a second chance. Marjorie's home will help more people than you know. It was signed by a woman named Renee, one of the coordinators from the veterans group. I held that card for a long time. That evening, I drove into town and stopped by the property. My old house. It looked different now, not in the structure, but in the energy. Fresh paint covered the porch rails. The front garden had been cleaned up. The oak tree still stood proud, its branches reaching wide like arms ready to hold the world. Through the front window, I saw two older gentlemen playing cards in the living room. The sound of laughter, real, full-bodied laughter, drifted out through the open screen. That house had a soul again. I didn't go inside. Just stood on the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, breathing it all in. And for the first time since I walked out with that suitcase, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I had passed something on. Marjorie would have liked this. No, she would have loved it. She would have baked pies and offered everyone seconds, then scolded them lovingly for not using coasters. Her voice still lived in that house. And now, it had new ears to listen. A few days later, I received a visitor at the cabin. It wasn't Michael. It was Henry, an old friend from the VFW. He walked with a cane now and wore a denim vest full of patches. We hadn't talked in years, not since Marjorie's funeral. Word got around, he said, handing me a six-pack and sitting slowly in the rocker beside me. You did something special, John. Took guts. Most of us go quiet when we get old. You reminded people we still have a say. We sat in silence for a long time, sipping beer and watching the sky go purple with dusk. You ever think about what's next? He asked. I nodded. Every day. Got any plans? Not yet, I said. But I've got ideas. And I did. Because silence, it turns out, doesn't just hold grief. It also holds possibility. The idea came slowly, not as a spark, but as a quiet nudge, like a familiar voice you hadn't heard in years. It started with a visit to the veterans' home. Mr. Keller had invited me to see the progress. We've started renovations, he said. Figured you might want to walk through one last time, or maybe one first time, depending how you look at it. I agreed. The living room had been painted a soft cream. The dining table, the one Marjorie and I used to crowd with board games and late-night puzzles, had been extended to fit 10. The back bedroom, once Michael's, was now labeled Quiet Room, Reading and Reflection. Marjorie would have cried if she saw it. Then laughed at herself for crying. In the hallway, I met Rosa, a retired schoolteacher who'd lost her husband in the Gulf War. She held out her hand, smiling gently. This place already feels like home, she said. Thank you. I didn't know how to respond. So I just nodded. Sometimes words aren't enough. As I drove back to my cabin, I couldn't stop thinking about her face, that quiet gratitude. The weight of it. It reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. I still had more to give. The next morning, I found myself rummaging through the cabin's back shed. It was half-rotted and full of old boxes, tools I hadn't used in years, and a thick layer of dust. But as I pulled open those creaky doors, I saw something else. Possibility. The space was bigger than I remembered. Long enough to hold a few tables. Wide enough to fit shelves along the walls. The window, though cracked, let in a surprising amount of light. That evening, I pulled out Marjorie's old notebooks, the ones she used to sketch designs for church bake sales, school fundraisers, craft fairs. Tucked between pages was a list she once made. Ideas for when we retire. It included garden club, reading hour with local kids, cooking nights for widows, a lending shelf with puzzles and board games. I stared at the list for a long time. Then I got to work. First, I called Emily, my granddaughter. We hadn't spoken much since everything happened, but she had sent a birthday card last year. Inside it, she'd written, "I still remember you teaching me chess in the living room. I miss those days." When she picked up the phone, her voice cracked just a little. "Grandpa?" "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "I need a hand with a little project." Within a week, she came by with paint cans, gloves, and a smile that felt like sunlight. Together, we cleared the shed, scrubbing the floor until the wood grain showed through. She found an old chalkboard behind some tarps. "You should hang this," she said. "For the book list." Next came the shelving, donated by the local library after they did some remodeling. The librarian, a tall man named Theo, offered to help set up a rotation of children's books and community reads. Then Henry returned, this time with 3 more veterans and a toolbox. They rewired the lighting, reinforced the roof, and installed a small heating unit. Within 3 weeks, the shed was no longer a shed. It was a haven. We called it Marjorie's Corner. A place for neighbors, kids, widows, and wanderers. A reading nook, a conversation circle, a place where loneliness came in but never stayed long. On Tuesdays, we had chess tournaments. On Fridays, Emily baked muffins and read aloud to whoever showed up, kids, seniors, anyone curious. Veterans came by just to sit and talk, to pass the time without TV screens and politics. And me? I found something I thought I'd lost. Purpose. Not the kind you chase in your youth, trying to prove something. But the quiet kind, the kind that settles in your bones and says, you're still needed. People started dropping by unannounced, some with books, some with food, others with nothing but a story. The space filled with soft voices, shared memories, the gentle sound of pages turning. The cabin, once silent, began to buzz with life. Emily told me one evening, Grandma would be proud. I looked around at the warm lights, the full chairs, the walls now lined with notes and photos, and I said, I think she already knows. That night, I sat on the porch alone, the air cool against my skin. I held one of Marjorie's letters, the one she wrote a few weeks before she passed. In it, she'd written, "If you're reading this, then you're still here. And if you're still here, John, promise me you'll keep living. Not just breathing. Living." I folded the letter gently, placed it back in its envelope, and whispered, I kept the promise. Because now I wasn't just surviving the silence. I was filling it. It started small, a knock on the cabin door on a rainy Thursday. A girl stood there, no more than 8, soaked to the bone, clutching a library book to her chest like it was the last thing she owned. "You open today?" she asked. I blinked. "Open?" She pointed to the shed. Marjorie's corner. Mom said you do reading here. My teacher said it's okay if I don't talk much, just listen. I stepped aside. Come in, sweetheart. Let's get you dry first. Her name was Lily. She came back every Thursday after that. Never said much. Just sat in the corner, listening, nodding at the stories. Over time, she started to smile. Then laugh. Eventually, she read out loud, just one page at a time, but with a proud little glow in her voice. Then came Thomas, the retired mechanic whose wife had passed the year before. He didn't like books, but he brought coffee. Sat on the bench out front and waved at every car that passed like he was the town's unofficial mayor. One day, he fixed the squeaky hinges on the shed without being asked. Then there was Elena, a recent widow, who began bringing fresh flowers every Sunday and arranging them in little vases along the shelf. She never said why. But I knew. It was for Marjorie. I didn't advertise. Didn't post flyers or beg for volunteers. People just came. One by one. As if they could feel something drawing them in, not obligation, not pity, just belonging. Emily, God bless her, became the heart of it all. She showed up after school 3 times a week, arms full of books or cookies or questions. One night, after everyone left, she stayed behind and helped me clean up. Grandpa, she said, do you think it's weird that I feel more at home here than I ever did in the condo? I paused. Why do you think that is? She looked around at the string lights, the old mismatched chairs, the wall of notes and thank you cards taped near the door. Because nobody's pretending here, she said. Everyone just shows up. As they are. That hit me deeper than I expected. Because for years I'd tried so hard to hold the family together through politeness, tradition, obligation. But I'd missed the real glue, sincerity. And somehow, in this little patchwork space of cast-off furniture and second-hand books, I'd found more family than I had sitting around bloodline Thanksgiving dinners. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I was refilling the woodpile when I noticed a car idling at the edge of the gravel drive. A sleek SUV. Dark windows. I wiped my hands on my shirt and walked over slowly. Michael stepped out. He looked older. Thinner. A little lost. Hi, Dad, he said. I stood there, unsure what to feel. He glanced at the shed. Emily talks about this place a lot. Says it's the only thing keeping her sane. I nodded. She's got good instincts. He shifted uncomfortably. Claire's gone. She left a while back. Moved out of state. I guess, she didn't sign up for a life without the house. I didn't respond. He looked down at his feet. I've been meaning to come by. Just, didn't know what to say. You still don't, I said. But you're here. He looked up. There was pain in his eyes. Not guilt. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of something close to understanding. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. But I wanted you to know I've been thinking about everything. I looked him in the eye. I don't need your apology, I said. I needed your respect. And your honesty. Years ago. He nodded. I know. There was a long silence. Then I said, you're welcome to visit. But this place, this isn't for show. People come here to be real. If you can do that, there's a chair for you. He didn't answer right away. Just looked past me, toward the shed where Lily's laughter echoed faintly through the cracked window. Then he said, maybe I'll try. That was it. No grand hug. No dramatic tears. But something shifted. Later that night, I sat by the fire inside the shed. Thomas was playing harmonica. Elena was crocheting something that might have been a scarf or a table runner, she hadn't decided. Emily sat beside me, sipping cocoa. Did you ever think, she asked softly, this is what family would look like one day? I shook my head. No, I said. But now, I can't imagine anything else. Because family, I'd learned, wasn't about shared names or matching blood. It was about who shows up. Who listens. Who stands beside you not because they have to, but because they want to. And sitting in that shed, surrounded by strangers turned family, I finally felt home again. It was just after sunset when I heard the knock, soft, hesitant, the kind that says the person on the other side isn't sure they're welcome. I opened the cabin door, and there he was. Michael. No suit this time. No swagger. Just a man holding a grocery bag with a bottle of tea and 2 sandwiches inside. I didn't want to assume you had dinner, he said. I stepped aside without a word. He walked in slowly, his eyes taking in the same worn rug, the old bookshelf, the fire flickering low in the hearth. I gestured to the table. You can sit. He did. We unwrapped the sandwiches. Turkey on rye. I hadn't had that since he was in high school. For a while, we just ate. No small talk. No awkward stabs at forced memories. Just 2 men chewing slowly, surrounded by the sound of a crackling fire. Then he said, Emily told me about the veterans moving into the house. About the reading shed. The community dinners. I nodded. She said you found real family again. That you're different now. I looked at him. I didn't change, Michael. I just stopped hiding who I am to make other people comfortable. He looked down, picking at the crust of his sandwich. I wanted to hate you, he said. After everything. Claire did. She said you were manipulative, selfish, controlling. I believed her for a long time. He paused. But when she left, and when things got quiet, I started remembering things. I stayed silent. Let him speak. Like the time I broke my arm and you sat by my bed every night. Or when you drove 8 hours to my college because I forgot my medication. You didn't say a word of complaint. Just handed it to me and drove home. He shook his head. And then I remembered the last few years, how I let Claire talk to you. How I let her erase Mom's pictures. Her garden. Her chair. And I said nothing. His voice cracked then. Just slightly. I don't know if it was fear. Or pride. Or just cowardice. But I didn't stand up for you. And I should have. He didn't cry. Neither did I. Some things are too deep for tears. I'm not here to ask for the house back, he said. I know what's done is done. And you were right to do it. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. Wooden, sanded smooth. Familiar. It was Marjorie's recipe box. I found it, he said. When we were packing. Claire wanted to throw it out. Said it was just old index cards. But I kept it. I took the box gently, opened the lid, and smelled it, cinnamon, cardamom, a hint of old flour and memory. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered. I really am. I looked at him. The son I'd raised. The man he had become. And maybe, just maybe, the man he was still becoming. I believe you, I said. We sat there, listening to the fire. I'm not asking to come back, he said. But I'd like to visit the shed sometime. Maybe read to the kids. Maybe help with the garden. You'd be welcome, I said. Not forgiven. Not forgotten. But welcomed. There's a difference. Forgiveness is a choice. A bridge. It takes time. But dignity? That's offered freely, not for their sake, but for your own. When he left, we didn't hug. We didn't make plans. He just nodded once and walked into the night. And I stayed behind, holding that recipe box, the one Marjorie wrote in with smudged hands and love in her pen. It felt like closure. Or maybe, like the first page of a new chapter. Has someone ever come back too late in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. It was a warm spring morning when the sign went up. Marjorie's house, a community haven. Hand-painted by one of the veterans, mounted beneath the old oak tree out front, the same tree where Michael once swung from a rope as a child, and where Marjorie used to hang wind chimes each May. The brass ones, with the softest ring you ever heard. I stood there in my old suit, the one I'd worn to her funeral, and ran my hand across the wooden post. Smooth. Solid. Just like the home it now marked. People were gathering, neighbors, kids, volunteers, local vets. Some dressed up, some in t-shirts and jeans. No one came to impress. They came to belong. The ceremony was simple, just the way Marjorie would have wanted. Elena read a poem. Henry gave a short speech about second chances and quiet heroes. Emily, bless her, stood beside me and introduced a row of children who had come every week to the reading shed. They each handed me a flower, one by one, daffodils, daisies, tulips, until my arms were full and my heart, somehow, fuller. Then came my turn. I stepped up to the makeshift podium, cleared my throat, and looked out at the crowd. I built this house when I was 29, I began. I poured the foundation with my own hands. Hammered every nail. Painted the walls with Marjorie while we argued about shades of beige that looked exactly the same to me. Laughter rippled softly. This house has seen everything, first steps, last breaths, birthdays, arguments, burnt dinners, and long hugs. It's where I lost my wife. And where I almost lost myself. I paused, letting that truth hang in the morning air. But this house is more than wood and nails. It's memory. It's legacy. And it deserves to live again, not through inheritance, not through blood, but through service. I looked toward the porch, where Rosa stood arm in arm with two elderly gentlemen who now shared what used to be our guest rooms. So today, Marjorie's house begins again, not as a home for one family, but for many. For the forgotten, the grieving, the hopeful, and the healing. Applause came gently. Not loud. Not forced. Just honest. After the ribbon was cut, a red sash stretched across the front steps, people walked through, touching the walls, peering into the rooms, pointing at photos on the bulletin board labeled Then and Now. One wall held old black and white photos of Marjorie and me, our wedding day, the camping trips, the birthday parties. Right beside them, someone had pinned Polaroids of today, the kids reading in the shed, veterans sitting around a puzzle, Lily and Thomas planting herbs in the old flower bed. The contrast wasn't jarring. It was beautiful. A continuation, not a replacement. Later that day, I sat alone on the porch steps, sipping lemonade someone had handed me. The air smelled of cut grass and lilac. The oak tree's leaves rustled in the wind, not a harsh breeze, but a gentle whisper. I turned my eyes upward. "You see it, Marjorie?" I murmured. "It's alive again." For a moment, I swore I could hear her hum. That same soft tune she used to sing when folding laundry. The one I never knew the name of but could still whistle in my sleep. I reached into my coat and pulled out her last letter. The one I'd carried through every chapter of this story. Keep the house warm. Keep the love alive. I had done that. Not the way I expected. Not the way I wanted. But perhaps in the only way that truly mattered. I didn't just preserve a home. I gave it purpose. And in doing so, I found mine again. As the sun dipped low, casting gold across the porch and painting shadows on the lawn, Emily came to sit beside me. "Think she'd be proud?" she asked. I nodded, voice thick. I think she'd be baking cookies for every single person in there right now. Emily laughed. And fussing at you for not wearing a warmer coat. She always said I dressed like the calendar lied. We sat there, shoulder to shoulder, watching the lights in the windows flicker on, soft and warm. Real family was in there. Not just by name. But by choice. By kindness. By presence. And as the porch filled with music and the smell of casserole, I realized something simple and profound. Some houses die with their owners. But others? Others become eternal. Because when you fill a home with purpose, with memory, with open doors and honest hands, it doesn't just survive. It lives.